For decades we've been told one story about Iran and the Jewish people. It's a story of animosity, conflict, and deep-seated mistrust, a narrative of two ancient peoples on an irreversible collision course. But what if I told you that story isn't the whole truth? What if the modern narrative of endless conflict actually ignores a 3,000-year history, where the relationship between Persians and Jews was often defined not by hostility, but by alliance, respect, and mutual survival? What if I told you the Bible itself gives a pagan Iranian king the same title it reserves for its own prophesied savior, Messiah? This isn't a forgotten fairy tale. This is the hidden history of how a Persian emperor became one of the greatest allies the Jewish people had ever known. And it rewrites much of what we think we know about the Middle East. To understand this unbelievable alliance, we have to go back to the 6th century BCE, one of the darkest moments in Jewish history. The kingdom of Judah had fallen. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian emperor, Nebuchadnezzar II, did the unthinkable. He conquered Jerusalem, burned the sacred First Temple to the ground, and dragged the Jewish people into captivity. This was so much more than a military defeat. It was an existential crisis. Exiled in Babylon, the Jews were a people cut off from their spiritual and ancestral home. Their holiest site was a pile of rubble, and their leaders were enslaved. For 70 years, they lived in a foreign land, under an empire that wanted to erase their identity. Prophets like Jeremiah had warned this was coming, but that was little comfort to those who wept by the rivers of Babylon, dreaming of a home they thought they'd never see again. They were on the brink of disappearing, of being assimilated and forgotten by history. Their story was nearly over, but then a new power began to rise in the east, a power that would not only change the map of the ancient world but would also alter the destiny of the Jewish people forever. His name was Cyrus, king of a small state called Persia. At the time, Persia was a minor player on a stage dominated by the Babylonians, but Cyrus wasn't just another warlord. He had extraordinary military genius and, even more remarkably, a revolutionary political vision. Starting in 559 BCE, he launched a series of stunning campaigns, forging the Achaemenid Empire, the largest the world had ever seen. In 539 BCE, Cyrus stood at the gates of Babylon, the impenetrable fortress that held the Jewish people captive. And the city fell, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Cyrus's army marched into Babylon in peace, welcomed by many as a liberator, but it was what Cyrus did next that truly shocked the ancient world. In an age where conquerors ruled through cruelty and forced assimilation, Cyrus introduced a radical new policy: tolerance. He believed an empire was more stable when its diverse peoples could keep their own cultures and worship their own gods. This wasn't just a moral stance, it was brilliant political strategy. The proof? An object that survives to this day, the Cyrus cylinder. Discovered in the ruins of Babylon in 1879, this small clay cylinder records Cyrus's decree, describing how he allowed displaced peoples to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. While it doesn't mention the Jews by name, it confirms that his policy of restoration was real. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a rebuilder, and for the Jews in Babylon, he was the answer to their prayers. The Bible's book of Ezra records the moment that changed everything. It says that in his very first year as ruler, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom. That proclamation was a royal decree granting Jews permission to return to Jerusalem and, crucially, to rebuild their temple. Cyrus didn't just permit their return, he funded it. He ordered that the sacred temple vessels Nebuchadnezzar had looted, all 5,400 of them, be returned. He even commanded the royal treasury to help pay for construction. This is why the prophet Isaiah, writing more than a century before Cyrus was born, delivered one of the most astonishing prophecies in the Bible. Isaiah called Cyrus by name, declaring that God would anoint him to subdue nations. Then in Isaiah 45:1, the text refers to Cyrus as God's anointed one, the Hebrew word for which is Mashiach, or Messiah. That's right, a non-Jewish pagan king was given a title reserved for the prophesied savior of Israel. Cyrus was God's chosen instrument, a shepherd tasked with bringing his people home. Following this decree, the book of Ezra records that an initial wave of over 42,000 Jews undertook the arduous journey from Babylon back to Jerusalem, led by a prince from the house of David. There, they laid the foundation for the Second Temple, which would stand for nearly 600 years. For 2 centuries, under the benevolent rule of Persian kings, the Jews enjoyed a period of peace, autonomy, and religious freedom. the survival of Judaism was secured, not in opposition to a foreign empire, but through an alliance with it. This legacy of friendship continued for centuries, most famously in the story of Queen Esther, the Jewish queen of Persia, who saved her people from a genocidal plot. This alliance between a Persian king and the Jewish people shows that history is always more complex than the simple stories we're told. It proves that friends can be found in the most unexpected of places. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as I do, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next exploration of the past. The bond forged by Cyrus the Great echoed through millennia. Even after the Persian Empire fell, Jewish communities continued to thrive in Iran, becoming one of the oldest diaspora populations in the world. And this story doesn't just end in the ancient world. Jump forward to the 20th century. Before the 1979 Iranian Revolution, under the Shah, Iran and the modern state of Israel were close, if complicated, strategic partners. Driven by shared opposition to Soviet influence and Arab nationalism, they collaborated on military, intelligence, and economic fronts. Iran supplied Israel with oil, and Israeli firms helped build Iranian infrastructure. Israel's national airline even operated direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. For a time, it seemed the ancient friendship had been reborn. The 1979 revolution shattered this relationship, replacing pragmatism with ideological hostility. The narrative was rewritten, and the long history of cooperation was deliberately buried under a new story of perpetual conflict. Yet despite the harsh political rhetoric, Iran is still home to the largest Jewish community in the Middle East outside of Israel, a remnant of that ancient population. The 3,000-year history between Persians and Jews is not a simple story of enmity. It's a complex tapestry of coexistence, cultural exchange, and at a crucial moment, a powerful alliance that saved a people. The actions of Cyrus the Great are a powerful reminder that the divisions of today were not always the realities of yesterday. So the next time you hear the story of an inevitable conflict between Iran and the Jewish people, remember the pagan king the Bible called a Messiah, and ask yourself, which histories are we told to remember and which are we made to forget?